So, a warm welcome to Dr. Anil Kakotkar and, of course, all the participants who are joining us today for this special keynote lecture on rural development and transformation through silage by Dr. Anil Kakotkar, who is the former director BARC, former chairman Atomic Energy Commission, former secretary Department of Atomic Energy, Government of India, and chairman now Rajiv Gandhi Science and Technology Commission, Government of Maharashtra. Sir, as you are aware, AgroVision Foundation, under the guidance of Shri Nitin Gadkari, who is the Union Minister, for over a decade now is engaged in various activities to educate, encourage, and empower farmers, particularly in Vidarbha and Central India. And all our efforts are directed towards teaching them about the alternative cropping patterns, use of technology in agriculture, water management, then modern farm practices, and also for their sustainable livelihood, other allied activities like fishery, poultry, dairy, sericulture, and beekeeping. In fact, sir, AgroVision Foundation is also working to promote grassroots level innovators in agriculture and agri startups. And sir, indeed, we feel privileged that in one of our earlier sessions at Nagpur, we had the honor that we had also delivered a keynote address on application of radiations in agriculture. I think it's it's way back in 2015. So with this now, I would like to invite Dr. C.D. Mai, who is the is the chairman of our advisory board of AgroVision, and who is the main brain behind our various activities, to formally introduce Dr. Anil Kakotkar and about the subject. Dr. Mai, please.
Thank you, Dr. Boratkar. I'm able to. Are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Able to hear?
Yeah.
प्रथम मी काकोडकर साहेबांना नमस्कार करतो. I think I must thank him. Namaskar, that he has accepted to be with us on this occasion. Actually, Dr. Kakotkar does not need any introduction to all our participants, as he has been with AgroVision also and with a lot of other people to educate us on the irradiation technology in agriculture. A great nuclear scientist known for his contribution in peaceful use of nuclear science, has now turned towards several aspects of energy, education, and social development. Dr. Kakotkar is going to talk on his most lovable theme, that is rural development and transformation, and that too with silage technology. When rural development comes in mind, the very first thing touches our mental chord is agriculture. His interest in agriculture research stems from the very fact that he knew that rural development shall occur only when Indian agriculture and Indian farmers prosper. Actually, because he knows that India resides more in villages. As a director of BARC, he initiated series of projects. I know them because he had a collaboration with my university, that is at Barbadi. And actually in 98-99, I for the first time met him. And I was surprised how a nuclear scientist is interested in agriculture. But then when I saw his knowledge, I was also shocked that he knew much more than many of our agricultural scientists. His interest in agriculture, even he became chairman, was also evident to me. At Atomic Energy Commission, he organized a meeting when I was agriculture commissioner, and he organized a meeting specially to tell them what are the improvements to be made in seed value chain so that the farmers are able to get the new seeds early. I think I remember that meeting because I was also attending it. Being a close associate of late Dr. Abdul Kalam, who actually forwarded the entire concept of UDAN, providing urban amenities to rural areas. Actually, Dr. Kakotkar, being his own colleague, he extended that into a different. And that is what he called as silage concept. Now here in silage, not only amenities will automatically come, provided we give them the technologies which are available. He has done from BARC's technologies, he has extended to the village. And now as RGSTC chairman, I know that he has been working with us. I am also closely associated, very fortunate with you, that we have three major projects which are going. One is in Pandharpur, which is almost completed. And now we have started a project in our Dharma region at Gadchiroli, which is called as Science and Technology Resource Center, where we are trying to see how the tribal life can be, how the tribal youth can be trained technologically in bamboo, medicinal plants and all. And the same project in a different mode is now being taken to Nandurbar under the University of North Maharashtra. So he is involving, the first time we are looking that engineering students are interested in agriculture. I think this is a big change that Dr. Kakodkar has been able to bring. And he has tapped them for rural-based projects and supported them, large number of them in Maharashtra. Along with rural development, he took keen interest in education also. Because I am associated with him in MKCL, and I was surprised that he started looking into the education of primary students right in the villages. And through MKCL, he is guiding them as to what kind of programs we can make even in this pandemic time. I think it's a very unique picture of him. He takes so much of wide interest and spend time. Agrovision is extremely happy, sir, that you have agreed to give lecture. I would also inform the listeners to kindly read his two books. One is his personal memoir, which has already fired me. They called as Fire and Fury. And written by Anita Patil on Surya Koti Samaprabha Drashta Anuvad Yantrik, Dr. Anil Kakodkar. So the readers are now, I do not wish to stand between him and all the speakers. I think we will have a piece today as several new ideas he may give us to start our Agrovision project in further. Thank you, sir, very much. And I wish Dr. Borodkar to please continue. Request Dr.
Yes.
Kakodkar.
I think, Dr. Kakodkar, we are all ears to listen to you. The floor is with you, sir, now.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mai and Dr. Borodkar, for this opportunity to talk on Agrovision Foundation's platform in this WebEx meeting on a topic which is very close to my heart. As Ravi correctly observed, I did participate in one of the annual events of Agrovision, and I'm reasonably aware of the fantastic work that is being done. And as during my presentation, you would see, silage is a broader concept, has several elements. One element is to bring technology awareness and familiarity to the people at the grassroots, in this case, farmers. And in that sense, I think the activity of silage, you are doing it for a much longer time than what I'm talking about. I'm only packaging them in a kind of a comprehensive package. As Dr. Mai correctly observed, Dr. Kalam's Pura has been quite deep behind this effort. He had also gone to Pravaranagar. That is one of the places where the inspiration for Pura came when Dr. Kalam visited there. So all I'm trying to say is, it is these actual efforts on ground that inspires you to think further and kind of refine your efforts. Pura was one of them. And as Dr. Mai said, uh, bringing amenities is one thing, important, very important. But for sustainable development, I think there is no substitute to locally rooted education and technology familiarity and the ability to innovate locally. And that is what Silage is about. And if I can have the presentation shared, I will
Sure.
carry on with the presentation.
Vivek, screen, please.
Now, while this, yeah, it's already there.
Next.
Next one, yeah. Yeah. Now, we are getting close to India at 75. Next year will be our 75th year of independence. So I thought before beginning, let me do a very broad stock taking. Of course, we are the largest democracy, but more important is the fact that democracy has taken roots in our country, and that's a very kind of satisfying aspect we should all be very proud about. The second aspect is we are the second largest population in the world, soon to be the largest. We are the largest, what they call demographic dividend, which gives us a huge opportunity at the present point of time, the largest market, one of the largest economy, and geopolitically, India is a very important country. And that also is an important feature that we should not lose track of, both in terms of understanding the overall dynamics and particularly understanding opportunities that we can leverage. More importantly, in terms of progress made during last 70, 75 years, we are among the top in terms of many things. Agriculture and horticulture products, India has made historic progress, but also other infrastructure related goods, electricity, coal, steel. Similarly, infrastructure like railway network, other aspect of infrastructure like IT and communication network, the industry that goes with it, even entertainment industry, particularly cinema, the Bollywood, is these are one of the giant strengths of the country. So I don't want to go into detail. There are many aspects, but broadly, I thought these are the three main features to really tell us where we are. Now, today our GDP, it consists of roughly half of it coming from service sector, 1/3 coming from industry sector, and out of that 1/3, half, that is 1/6 of the total GDP comes from manufacturing sector, and agriculture contributes to another 1/6. Important to note is the Indian diaspora, which is today the largest in the world, 17.5 million worldwide. Now, they contribute to about 3.4% of India's GDP by way of remittances. Now, 3.4% may be small, but recognize that in per capita terms, that contribution is roughly twice of an average Indian's contribution to India's income. So that's an important aspect. And in the context of collaborations, I think we should recognize that this is an important thing. Now, having come this far, there are, of course, not everything seems to be fine. There are some things we need to be worried about. For example, the growing disparity. I think it's very troubling, at least to somebody like me. Of the total income, the top 0.1%, they have an income share of about 10 to 11%, and top 1% have an income share of 22%. This is something, it shows how uneven the India's income is distributed. In terms of per capita income, we know rural income is roughly half the urban income, which tells us about disparity on a macro scale, the urban-rural divide. Now, we may think that the rural India is poor, but the Gini index of income in rural area is actually a bit higher than urban areas, meaning the disparity in rural area is a bit higher than average. And leave aside the very top layer, but average disparity that we see in urban side, the rural side disparity is actually a bit more. Even more worrying is the fact that Gini index of income is actually rising in both the domains, rural as well as. So actually, this disparity is not coming under control. And I think rising disparity is an invitation to, shall I use a strong word, disaster. I'll come to that. We have seen that. Now, to get an anecdotal picture of disparities, let me take the medical sector. Now, while India boasts of very kind of, medical tourism, India attracting medical tourism because of excellent facilities that we have. But if you look at our ranking in the healthcare, that has actually slipped to something like 150th place. Our Human Development Index stands at 129, whereas our neighbor Sri Lanka has Human Development Index at 71. So I think something is not right, and I think we need to correct that. And this is extremely important about taking India forward in a stable manner. Now, this is not unique to India. This is happening in many countries. And unless one makes special efforts to correct and stabilize these situations, these problems actually aggravate. And the reason for that is all of us, human beings, are also part of the animal kingdom on this earth. And so there are some animal instincts in all of us. And I think there is no exception. All of us have to admit that each one of us have some animal instinct. And of course, because of our upbringing, because of mentoring in our families, schools, society, we have also developed some good human instincts, human values. Now, we have been growing, development is taking place on the basis of the fact that human is an intelligent animal. And so by acquiring knowledge, by observing things around, the capability of human beings has multiplied many folds compared to other animal species.
Next,
and that has given, yeah, are you on, next, I think you have to go to the next slide, sorry. Yeah, that's the one. So that has given the human beings that extra power, the force multiplier. Now this power can become exploitative, which it has become in many places. And that is, to my mind, due to the animal instincts that exist in all of us. Because, we have that fear, we have that kind of tendency to dominate, we have that, that greed, human greed. So, but at the same time, same force multiplier could become a great contributor to human welfare and development of good societies, as has happened. See, both of them have happened together, and that is a part of human instinct. Now, inculcation of human values through mentoring and practice. Just mentoring is not enough. There is also a great importance to practice. Now, the together is the key to sustainable welfare societies, even as knowledge becomes the force multiplier for human capability. Now, this is at the root cause of this problem which I was mentioning, because as Mahatma Gandhi had correctly observed, there is enough on earth for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. And that is precisely the problem or the crisis that we are currently in. Can we go to the next slide? So now let's look at this picture even further. Now, discordance between wealth creation, which is continuously happening, and equity in opportunities. Now, wherever there is no discordance, you will actually find that you have a very good welfare society. But wherever there is that discordance, then you have this problem. You see a lot of instabilities coming in. You get a lot of cliff edge situations, in the sense you feel that everything is going fine and you don't even know that you are on a cliff edge, and then there is a collapse. These are called the tail end risks, and there are many in human history. We have recently seen reverse migration of daily wage earners in cities uh, during the current pandemic, and what a crisis it led to. That actually was a cliff edge situation. We're all concerned about climate, and we're all, very concerned how close are we to the cliff edge. Now, these are all, they happen because of, on one side, pollution, on one side, depleting earth resources. And then there are many things which appear on the global scale, some appear on regional scale, some appear on local scale, but they are crises all the same. And at different scales, everything has to begin with individuals, but at the society level, at national level, at international level, I think we need to strike this balance between wealth creation and equity in opportunities. And that is, I think, the main theme that I'm going to talk about. Higher wealth creation and equity in opportunities at the base of socio-economic pyramid is the key. We have seen wealth has a tendency to accumulate at the top. That doesn't help. We have to make sure that we create wealth at the base of the pyramid. This is what Mahatma Gandhi was emphasizing. This is what Muhammad Yunus has been saying. And by the way, you would notice, I have not read that report, so I have not cited, but people tell me that Bangladesh is doing little better than India in economic terms, whereas that was not the case a few years back. So I think we need to look at this societal dimension along with technology and education. These are all very, very important. And so I started thinking about what I said, what should be done in the context of villages. Of course, Dr. Kalam's Pura gave a lot of inspiration. I had gone to Pravara during that time, had actually a day-long discussion with the late Balasaheb Vikhe Patil, and he explained to me in great detail the evolution at Pravara and also the evolution of Pura. And so that set me thinking. And in fact, I had asked him this question: if you want to make a beginning, you would make a beginning with livelihood first or education first? And to my great surprise, he told me livelihood first. And of course, I still feel they both have to go together. Many places we have excellent education programs, and that is contributing to livelihood. So these things are happening, not that we don't know. But I think there is importance to making them happen together in great synergy. And that is what Silage is about. You can describe it in many ways. Best of city in a village, or in the context of the knowledge era or digital era, you can describe it as digital city in a modern village. Or more generally, you can also describe this as knowledge-based ecosystem for integrated education, research, technology development, and deployment, as well as livelihood and capacity building in rural areas. So that's a long way of explaining. But I think they are all important. The other day in some discussion, somebody pointed to me a very meaningful quote by H.G. Wells. And that quote says, civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. And I felt how true is that statement. And we have just felt the real impact of this. And of course, climate change crisis, which is impending, is also points towards that. So I think we must ensure that right quality of education, and I must emphasize right quality, wins before a catastrophe overtakes us. Can we go to the next slide? So hence the silage, we should aim in silage to create sustained bonds with socio-cultural roots while remaining up to date with knowledge empowerment, and out of that technology empowerment, and be the most competent society globally. So that should be our objective. In knowledge era, we should recognize that there are actually far better opportunities, far bigger opportunities in villages compared to what we are used to. We have this notion in our mind, village means agriculture. Village means now we started talking about allied activities. Then we started talking about value addition to agro produce. Now we should recognize that we are in knowledge era. And we just saw that 50% of India's GDP is contributed by service sector. Service sector has become very important and prominent in knowledge era. And there is nothing that prevents service sector to contributing equally well in rural areas, provided we take care of the competence building and education of youth there. And I think it's a very simple effort to be launched. And if not 50%, but in theory that rural sector also can contribute 50%, and rural area in terms of population is bigger than urban area. So you can imagine the contribution to GDP that can be very quickly brought about just on that means in terms of, and Dr. Mai mentioned about MKCL. I'm glad that we are all associated with MKCL. MKCL is precisely attempting to do that, and that will lead to a very rapid increase in GDP of our country. But service sector is not an exception. I think even for manufacturing sector, for that matter, we can do the same thing, because knowledge technologies of today are actually they support democratization, they support decentralization. You can have 3D printing done in villages and supply parts to assembly line wherever it exists, and create a fairly large industrial activity in rural areas. The important thing is to do human capacity building in rural area, which has been, I would say, thoroughly neglected. When we talk about rural education, we only talk about primary education. At best, okay, you go to a bigger town, you could have a secondary school, even bigger town, high school. I think this mindset is kind of, market driven. How many children are there? So you need so many facilities. I think we should create these facilities that are need driven to create this economic upliftment in villages, and that is the main theme behind Silage. The capacity building of human resource well beyond the rural agri domain and exposing them to today's opportunities in rural area is the key. Now, can we go to the next slide? Now, let's look at the rural domain in some statistical terms. Now, the latest statistics, at least I could lay my hand on, was the ACCC survey of 2011. So this is a bit outdated, but I think things might have become only worse, not better. Important thing to recognize that we say rural area means agriculture. The households which can survive on agriculture, they are essentially only 30%. 30% of total households can make a living through cultivation. Because the rest of them, either they do not have land, there are many others who have land, but that land holding is so small that they cannot get their survival on the agriculture output. And so the more than 50% of rural households, they actually survive on manual casual labor. So I think what I said earlier becomes even more important. I think agriculture is important, but there is something else which is much more important, and that is to create higher levels of income. See, you talk about doubling farmers' income. I think we should talk about doubling the villagers' income, because villagers are more than 50% of India's population, and average rural income is actually half of average urban income. So we should have the aim of, to begin with, doubling rural income to the same level as urban income. And we should have an ambition of total India's average income, per capita average income, to be comparable with the best in the world. That is what Knowledge Era should contribute. And before we lose our demographic dividend, we must achieve this. And hence, I think we should drive on silages. Next slide. So clearly, we have to begin with what are the current opportunities. And the first route to enhancing income is to bring in technology, which is available. Going forward, one would like to see locally generated technologies, need appropriate locally generated technologies, but make a beginning with getting technology, relevant technology from wherever. Now, actually, this began, as far as I'm concerned, sometime in 2007 when I was chairman Atomic Energy Commission. And my colleague, Ajit Patankar, I hope he's there in the audience, he actually brought in this proposal that there are several technologies in Bark which have great relevance to rural areas. So why not we create a package and a program to kind of demonstrate these technologies in rural areas. And so began this program of Akruti, Advanced Knowledge-Based Rural Technology Initiative by Bark. And this initially was deployed at 3 places to see how it works. And when that deployment, we said we would put this to test. So we would put this to scrutiny by others. So rather than leveraging DAE funds, we said we'll submit it to funding agencies, let them carry out the review. And at that time, RGSTC, that is how I got attracted to RGSTC. I knew nothing about RGSTC at that time. The 3 projects were approved by RGSTC in Chiplund, Pali, and one more place. And we said that we must aim at making them self-sufficient within the project duration. Now, we may not have got completely there, but we made fairly rapid progress, and that actually gave the confidence that you can carry out deployment and getting people to use technologies and run these programs in a sustainable way. And that we then said that, okay, let us bring in knowledge institutions, because if you want to make them sustainable, then you need technology to be continuously rejuvenated. If you use the technology, same technology year after year, either there are competing technologies that come in the market, so you lose your initiative, or there are some problems with the technology, and then you need to overcome them. And so it is important that the local knowledge institutions are also involved in these activities, and through them, we on one side kind of support this program of technology information, technology acquisition, technology demonstration, inculcating technology skills, but simultaneously start research activity around that technologies or other related technologies, so that internalization of technologies in the rural domain becomes that much easier and that much possible. And that is what really contributes to sustainability of this effort. So the first exercise for this was actually done, as Dr. Maya mentioned, at an institution called SWERI, Shri Vittal Education and Research Institute at Gopalpur near Pandharpur. And there, of course, this Akriti Tech Pack was set up. Several Akrutis, because by this time experience on Akruti was already there. So we are also set up in the neighborhood, and we added a school education module, and the college themselves engaged with the related R&D work. So it was an exercise in a comprehensive education, and I, for one, imagine that when we talk about education, first of all, we should talk about it with a student-centric notion. And we should not compartmentalize. Seeing the skilling goes to ITI and vocational thing goes to vocational institutes, and the mainstream education goes somewhere else. As it is, we have agriculture universities and the mainstream universities, and that divide is actually discomforting to me. So I think we should have an education environment where student has a choice. It may be necessary for him to straddle between institutions, but it should be possible in this ecosystem where student gets hands-on capability built through structured training and apprenticeship on one side. Wherever there are procedures, whether it is building a house, whether it is doing agriculture, whether it is carrying out surgery or carrying out a great piece of engineering, I think you require vocational education, which I would say is procedural knowledge. You have understood the knowledge, basics of it, and then codified into a procedural knowledge, which many people call, or most of them call, as vocational education. And somebody who wants, at whatever level, it could be at the apprentice level, it could be at a licentiate level, it could be at a degree level, or it could be at a super specialty level. But there should be exposure to procedural knowledge and training depending on the student's interest. And finally, of course, on the mainstream, it should give knowledge which is rooted in life skills. It should give knowledge which is rooted in society, so that the individual remains relevant to the society at whatever time he comes out of the education system. But he should be able to go on to the frontiers of knowledge in that particular discipline, and that would include a lot of research. And of course, we have reached this kind of situation only in few institutions like IITs. We are yet to reach this in a society, but I do hope that with Silage ecosystem going forward, we should be able to create such an ecosystem at every location if not within a single institution, but within a collective of institutions in a given area. And it is with this intention that we said that in that Gopalpur Village, we will also make a beginning with school education, which is IT enabled, in terms of digital connectivity in rural areas, ICT literacy. People have to become familiar, and the experience and shown that this is not such a big problem as is made out, provided you are able to reach the devices and the infrastructure. And then, of course, the uh, instruction, the non-intrusive supplementation of the content and knowledge delivery. And this is the main thing where teachers do play an important role. Now, for this purpose, Gopalpur, we sourced technology from BARC. Simultaneously, we ran a project with BIOF called Mahanetra, where we sourced BIOF technologies but implemented them in a largish way just to learn from the experience about sustainability. And I'm glad, actually, I followed up that project a couple of years after the project period was completed, and I found several activities on the basis of their own revenue case were actually continuing. So again, to say that you can make these things sustainable. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So that was the beginning of Pandharpur Village. It has an element of a rural human and resource development facility, which is sitting in the campus of Sweri. And there are a lot of activities of different kinds, both engaging with outside people in terms of their familiarity with technology, capacity building and all is done. But also the local students and faculty, they participate in R&D, and I'll come to that in a moment. The school system, a quick kind of network, I'm repeating it here, and the activities of BIOF that were carried out. It was in a largish activity in 4 different talukas spread far apart in Maharashtra, but one of them was actually in the same area as the Pandharpur Village. So the idea was there's a lot of exchange that has taken place between the two projects, and that was a great experience. Next slide. Next slide. Next to area, we thought, because each area is different. Having a concept of doing this is one thing, but the needs of people are different. The technologies that have come into play are different. The habits are different. So it's not as if you have tried out one concept in one place, it will work in every other place. Far from it. And so we said, let us look at some 2 or 3 locations which are very diverse from each other. And so the next choice was to go to Gondwana University in Gadchiroli, because that was a new university at that time. And of course, that also is one of the most backward and tribal area, and where there are actually this attention of the whole state, or for that matter, country, is in that location in terms of carrying out developmental intervention. So I thought this is a good place to do. And there, this is actually now being done. Gopalpur was being spearheaded by a college or a education institution. The Gadchiroli Science and Technology Resource Center, that's the name, but in essence, it's also a village. It is rooted in Gondwana University, Gadchiroli itself, and it's engaged with the neighborhood in a variety of things. For example, in aquaculture, for which technologies were sourced from MAPSU, bamboo craft, for which I think we got a lot of help from IIT Bombay. Then there is a lot of activity in relation to the non-timber forest produce. And of course, while doing all this, we are talking about incubation, we are talking about academic programs, because this while we contribute to livelihood of people, this experience should also contribute to academic program and influence the academics and make it more relevant to the local needs rather than the standard syllabus, which is kind of sometimes irrelevant. One of the famous example I give is Gadchiroli is known for timber. How many civil engineers being trained in Gadchiroli engineering colleges can construct a house out of timber? Sorry, out of bamboo. I'm talking about bamboo, I'm sorry. And so whatever we can do with cement, concrete, stones and bricks or timber, we should be able to do with bamboos. And we know this has been done. People have constructed houses, people have constructed bridges. So why can't this be a part of academic program, or for that matter, the non-timber forest produce? We can steer a lot of activity, or aquaculture. In fact, aquaculture has made a lot of impact. And Dr. Mai, who actually spearheads, he is our advisor, main advisor. He chairs that committee. Can tell you more on this. But I get that there is, of course, this is a new project. These things take time. They say old habits die hard. So we shouldn't expect spectacular progress in 2 years or 3 years. But I think progressively this should certainly make a lot of difference. And there are, of course, several other activities in terms of certificate courses, in terms of routing research in the neighborhood using a university scheme that we have routed from RGSTC. I'm glad to tell you that STRC is also getting some funded research projects from other funding agencies and implementing that there. So I think slowly and slowly we want to bring in this self-sustainability element. Next one. Now, these two, Gopalpur and Gadchiroli, geographical scale wise, is an experience over somewhat wider area compared to Gopalpur. But in the long run, in terms of assimilating these efforts into the governance, national governance framework, I found that these things will never get integrated into national governance framework unless each one of them become an entity which can deal with the way government acts. The smallest unit of governance, to my understanding, is a block. So unless you are able to take and demonstrate this activity to the scale of a block, and then if there is credible evidence and people themselves see the benefit and success of such an effort, obviously the people itself will demand and government will obviously follow to kind of bring in, and this could get integrated into the national governance framework at that point of time. Today, it's not very hard for any one of you to imagine that it's not very easy to integrate this into regular governance framework unless it becomes a part of a top-down scheme. And moment it becomes a part of top-down scheme, I'm very certain it will fail. We are talking about a bottom-up development, and that is the important part. And so we said, okay, we can do the next experiment on a somewhat larger scale. And this time we have chosen Nandurbar, which is actually in many respects more backward than Gadchiroli, but it is as backward in area. And of course, it comes within the jurisdiction of North Maharashtra University, which is headquartered at Jalgaon. And luckily, just as Gondwana University was a new university at that time, here North Maharashtra University luckily had already created plans to set up a tribal academy at Nandurbar. And we felt that this is a good opportunity to kind of use this happening to do this experiment on a larger scale. So there is a new project. This is just new. Hardly anything has actually happened except the planning process. But the idea is to do this on a uh, area development basis. So it's called Silage Area Development Program, and that is so it. I won't go into the detail, but it they have identified the villages and where what will be done, what will be the capacity building, what will be the technologies deployed, how to build in the sustainability factor. But it's important that we may probably have to do one or two more experiments at the same level, block level, and demonstrate success. And hopefully, then it can get integrated into the overall national governance. Next one. Next one. Next slide, please. No, sorry, back one. Now that's the story of silage ecosystem. I think aim is to create an ecosystem uh, which is sustainable, integrated block development, at that level, where you see synergy between education, research, and development. And then you also do all the other things which are there on the right hand side of this table. You have to also arrange for microfinance, and so that you get that self sustainability complete. I'm very glad to tell you that while we are doing this experiment in these three places, there are others where they are on their own picking it up. And particularly some of the universities are picking this activity on their own, which is a very refreshing thing. And it's very important that this silage ecosystem, rather than being regimented from the top, we say do 1, 2, 3, and you issue those orders from Delhi or Mumbai. I think it will be a failure because there is diversity and there is special feature of each location which has to be accounted for. So the process we should allow for natural adoption by people, and it should emerge from bottom up. Next slide. Now, just to tell you some kind of lateral benefits, the Gopalpur silage, which is that RHRDF MKCL Knowledge Foundation has kind of is supporting us for managing aspect of that, and they notice that the sugarcane cropping, there are these people who move, they are virtually nomads, and during the season they move out from their place and go place to place where the sugarcane has to be cropped, and they move along with the whole family, children, and they found that safe drinking water is an issue because they will drink water from nearby pond or whatever resource that is there. And there used to be a lot of problem with regard to the health, particularly for the children. So anyway, as a part of Akruti development, and we have this the nano filtration system for water purification, safe drinking water. Same technology, but was repackaged in a manner that these people, when they are on the move, they can move with this so that they can use water from anywhere, filter it, and make safe for drinking. And I'm told that it has become very popular and very effective. Next one. On the other side, I asked Sweri and particularly Dr. Prashant Pawar. This is a bit dated, this slide maybe, but to figure out what is the impact on the higher education ecosystem at Sweri as a result of this. And he told me, of course, they have been conducting great activities for the neighboring engineering colleges, and so that apart, but within the college, this is a description, and I'm very happy to see that there are also PhD level projects in progress. They are publishing in journals. Uh, the it actually so the activity at Sweri is a healthy mix of rural relevant technologies and current trends in advanced technologies anywhere, and the two coexist, and that is the kind of thing that we should see, and I'm sure the academics at Sweri will make this richer and richer as we go forward. They also conduct an Agri Challenge event for engineering college in the neighborhood, and I'm told that's very popular. Next one. Now, I want to come back to school education. We had this experience and experiment going on at 5 schools within 12 to 15 kilometer neighborhood of Gopalpur. But I am happy that the participant institutions, particularly MKCL Knowledge Foundation, YCMOU, and all others, several people have, Homeoba Center for Science Education has played a role, IIT Bombay has played a role. But I think these activities are going on. Not that they would not have gone on without this, but I think there is this awareness that different people are looking at silage in different way. People in education and academics, they look at silage as enriching education and academics. People in the area of village development, they are looking at silage as a way of enhancing income of people. Uh, like that, there are different outcomes, and that is the way. I certainly, as I said, I want to repeat, there should be no regimentation of silage. Now, the delivery of ICT enabled learning content and education management, MKCL as a product eSchool, to cover structured learning, enrichment learning, and social learning. And this is something which they have tried out, and it works extremely well. And I'm sure it will spread to schools more and more as time goes by. The schools must also be networked with neighborhood akrutis, and we should locate akrutis and schools kind of next to each other for children to benefit from this experience, even as the local people benefit for their livelihood. And this effort should become complementary to formal education system in a non-intrusive way. Now, under that project, Shikshan Pandari, a lot of OERs were developed for standard 5th to standard 9th in Marathi. They are now available. Anybody can visit Mahadnyan on the web and get benefit of that. It is available for other schools to benefit, and it can be made available to other schools at zero marginal cost. Separately, for teachers is another important thing, and YCMOU, MKCL, KF, I said primarily led by Professor Takavle, they have actually brought in into existence a 2-year postgraduate diploma in e-education in digital technology, because I think we need teachers who can handle the new age education. So that is there. MKCL is conducting finishing school in a very successful manner, and the students from +2, for them this has become a much better avenue for assured jobs rather than pursuing a mainstream college education which takes them nowhere. Recently, we have, in fact, even today, schooling is in big crisis because of pandemic, and MKCL did this wonderful experiment, Tilimili, leveraging the telecast over Sahyadri channel, and now that actually shows that we have been talking about online education, but the smart telephones have not reached remote areas. smart telephones have not reached poor people wherever they are. And at the same time, our infrastructure, you don't get the right bandwidth in remote areas. So online education is actually unthinkable for 100% of the India. It may be okay for cities, for limited number of people from cities, but that will only aggravate the diversity, you know, because education diversity or education disparity, I'm sorry, education disparity could be even more damaging than economic disparity, which we are actually seeing. And so HACLK brought in Tilimili, and we need to now see how we can deliver education to everybody, the last person, as Mahatma Gandhi used to talk about, Antyodaya. So we must be able to devise technology to that level. Next slide. I want to give some more examples as to how these things are anyway happening. I said, silage we are talking about for last few years. But I sent some of these. In fact, I wrote a piece because of this distress migration, recalling Mahatma Gandhi's teachings on 2nd October. I sent that to Dr. Suvarna Patil, Medical Director of Vallavalkar Rural Medical College and Hospital at Derwent. And she responded back saying she saw a lot of kind of resonance between what is happening in their place, because it's not just the medical college or medical hospital which is doing a great service to the society. They also run schools, they run medical colleges, they run medical service, agriculture, livelihood, sports, and they have been doing this for about 45 years as a part of activities of the charitable institution, Sri Vittalrao Joshi Charities Trust. Now the impact, and this is what I came to know from them, that economy of Savarde village, which is the main village, they're all villages. These are all close to Chiprumund, but the economy of Savarde village and Derwan and all is a part of that domain, has risen to 3 crores per month since last few years. And now this 3 crores per month is actually much more than the economy of Chiplun, which is the known major city nearby. So Savarde has overtaken Chiplun, and people have started relocating to Savarde, and demand for land at Savarde has gone up tremendously. And so when I sort of corresponded, Dr. Patil has this to say: I witnessed decline in the migration of rural population during pandemic time, and in fact, many urbanites have relocated themselves in villages. They have settled with their jobs here, and that goes on, but ends up saying earn and learn scheme by our institute have taken leap after making technical education available to rural youth. In a true sense, Derwan and surrounding is a silage, and that's what Dr. Suvarna Patil is to say. So I was so happy to read this. This is it only validates the concept which was anyway happening, and I think we should actually move more in this direction for India's development. Next one. This is another interesting thing which is virtually viral in internet, so many of you might have seen. But the important thing is, I talked about service sector contributing in a big way in the rural domain as well. Now, Zoho is I'm sure you have heard about this, Mr. Sridhar Vembu, the Zoho founder, moved from San Francisco to Tenkasi, a hamlet 650 kilometers from Chennai. As of now, Zoho has 2 rural offices. They, of course, have a big place in urban areas, including in United States, but has 2 rural offices, one in Tenkasi and the other in Renegunta in Andhra Pradesh with 500 of its 9,300 employees globally working from these two locations. And they have planned to have many more of its 8,800 India-based employees working out of non-urban India, not necessarily these two places, but also others. So the rural vision which they have is to create small offices in rural areas and attract more local talent through, and they have in fact set up a Zoho University. Zoho University plans to train and employ rural youth. So you can see the impact that can happen on the rural areas. But it's not one-way traffic. He says this contributes to cross-fertilization of ideas, which is very important. And of course, mentoring and training of rural local people. And you can, I'm sure all of you have seen this, but if you have not seen, the link is given there. There is a similar thing I can mention to you, not necessarily in rural context, but I think these ecosystems about, the question is who will build that? Now, for me, it can begin from wherever. An NGO can begin, a university can begin, a college can begin. But to me, it looks like a university is the best entity because it is multidisciplinary, broad-based, and many universities have been tasked with the problem or the task, getting into rural engagement. And if they get into rural engagement the Sillage way, I think it will make a big difference. So it's all about creating an ecosystem. And ecosystem, when different people start working, it makes a huge difference. Just to give you a slight example, we have an excellent example in this medical device innovation. We have been importing something like 40,000 crore, 50,000 crore worth medical equipment every year. And we are all paying much more than the logical cost because there is a huge opportunity cost there. So IIT Bombay, College of Engineering Pune, and VNIT Nagpur, under the overall leadership of Professor Ravi of IIT Bombay, we have created what is called a BETIC, Medical Device Innovation Network, which is very big. 1,500 people. Now, this environment, BETIC, has already bagged 16 BIRAC big awards. Each award is 50 lakhs. Commercialized 21 products in just 6 years of its existence. Has actually contributed 10 products of use during COVID. And in fact, have also launched a ICU grade ventilator, Vishwas Pro. There is a similar example about Babatron, which was a teletherapy machine designed between BARC, Tata Memorial Hospital, and this company, Panacea. And now Panacea has several kind of ancillaries spread out in rural areas, and they are sourcing. And the equipment as advanced as teletherapy machines, I think 80-90% are indigenous. So that is the power of creating that ecosystem. And of course you need a catalyst, and I would urge universities to in fact play that role because that is very important. Next slide. Next slide, please. So I think there is a merit to integrated rural development. In knowledge era particularly, we should recognize that it equally favors rural as well as urban habitat. So you bring education and knowledge environment closer to rural habitat, you would actually get a lot of dividends. We need to be able to leapfrog. As I said, increasing marginal income of farmers 20%, 30% will happen the way we are doing. But if we leverage these possibilities, I think we can have an ambition of racing ahead and creating our competitiveness to the level of global competitiveness. And in that context, I think we must focus on all these elements: technology awareness and capacity building, link higher education, relevant professional knowledge, and their training and skilling, link knowledge education with development, and promote such conducive innovation ecosystem. Next, I'm just towards the end of my talk now. Now, I have been stressing about uh, sustainability of these efforts. And if you want these efforts to be sustainable, then you should be able to replicate them out of the resources generated. And that requires a kind of, financial inclusion. Um, so I call it creating a framework for DNA of rural development. And of course, I have been talking to several organizations, and I'm very happy that Tata's Social Alpha is working with us. And I hope we'll be able to create a framework where this becomes a self-sustaining framework. In fact, one of the experience that we have got is our education systems or education institutions are they don't have any experience about creating a revenue case, and many of our government schemes actually deter them from creating a revenue case. And if they don't create a revenue case, they can never become self-sustaining. And this is where MKCL Knowledge Foundation came and helped us. But I think we need to look at that aspect of making self-sustainability also going forward. Can I have the last slide, please? So, to me, what has been the problem in our country? If you look at society, economy, and knowledge as a three-legged stool, in our situation, Indian situation, society and economy has been always interacting. It has to, because everybody has to earn a living for survival, and you have to earn money. And so economy getting linked with society is, nobody has to make any efforts. You have to make efforts to link it well, but otherwise it will happen. It has been happening traditionally. But in our society, knowledge, the third leg of this stool, was sitting on a pedestal of its own, not interacting enough with society and economy, except to give kind of spiritual discourses where, if I go and attend one such discourse, I feel very, very good. I feel peaceful in my mind. But next day, I get back to the way I used to do things. So the question is, there are limits to preaching that can transform individuals, or there are limits to that the transformation of individuals in a way which will make societies enlightened. Individuals might get enlightened, but imagine when knowledge, society, and economy, they start engaging with each other very meaningfully. In the sense, I remember in my childhood, anybody in the school or college would not look at money because money was a bad word. Today, it has changed, but it has to be changed in a good way. Today, it is changed in a bad way. But I think we need to, the education institution should, they have started talking language of startups and kind of spin-offs and technology converting to product. Now, these things have to happen in a big way and not restrict to IITs, NITs, and elite institutions, but also universities and colleges in villages. And simultaneously, you must structure the economy. Today, our market economy itself is creating a lot of distortion and disparity. And I think there is a need. Today is not the time to go into that. But I am now convinced that a lot of problem has been created by the market economy. I'm not saying that that we have a right way, but we need to find the right way. And I think that element could also be brought into development of silage. But if you have these three, in the sense, these three legs of the stool, they become evenly balanced, then the mindset, the transactional mindset, because most of it is trading in absence of knowledge, and trading means transactional mindset, which will continue to remain. You cannot get rid of it. But when knowledge starts interacting, that mindset changes from trading to entrepreneurship, new creation, and that mindset creates a new kind of values. And once you have those new values, you will actually have the societal values nurtured much better than what you can do otherwise. And that's the importance of silage, in my view. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kakotkar. Yes, Dr. Mai, you can continue.
Please, please. I think I must wonderful lecture. We all enjoyed, sir, very much. Yeah, Dr.
Thank you.
I was just saying that Dr. Kakotkar very nicely and beautifully explained the concept of silage, which shall transform the rural society and bring in sustainable development. And you would explain this in a very simple words, addressing the need. That is not enough to double the income of farmers only, but doubling the income of rural society is very important. And also how this advanced knowledge-based rural technology initiatives, you call it Akruti, can bring in the changes, and how can we have the students focused procedural training centers for more skilling of the rural youth, and how can we have a better synergy between the incubation, academic programs, community support, etc. And most importantly, the last point you stressed, that there has to be a meaningful engagement in society, knowledge, and economy. I think, sir, you have very nicely explained your concept, but there are some viewers, I think they might have some questions or wanted to know more about this. So, Vibha, do you have any questions? Anybody want to know more about this? We can take a couple of them.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Bharatkar, and thank you, Mr. Dr. Kakotkar, for such informative and great lecture. And up till now, this subject was totally oblivious to me, and I would really like to thank you for enlightening us. So we have 4 to 5 questions. If you allow, then I can start with the questions now.
Sure.
Great, sir. So I have my first question from Mr. Shirish Darur. Mr. Shirish works in TERI, and he works in renewable applications. That's his area of expertise. And he has a question on the Gopalpur project. He wants to ask how this project was funded, and what is your advice on scaling these types of inventions?
Well, Gopalpur project, it was a joint activity. The project was primarily funded by, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the project was funded by the Rajiv Gandhi Science and Technology Commission. The technology and also the engagement of people, their training and all, that was done by Bhabha Atomic Research Center. And of course, the host was SWERI, the Shri Vittal Education and Research Institute. This project was funded actually for the project period, I don't remember, 3 years or 5 years, something like that, which is over quite some time back. I think the project must be over about 3 or 4 years back. And now this project is surviving on its own revenue stream. And so there has been, when you have sufficient resources coming in, doing such activities is one thing. When it comes to doing it on your own, it becomes another thing. So they are actually going through that phase, I would say quite successfully. and they are carrying out their own intervention.
Thank
Now,
you, sir.
going forward, as I said, no two places are alike, particularly in rural domain. And so to say that, well, this is a successful experience and replicate in 100 places, I think that will be ill-advised. It will not work. And that is because you need to understand the local situation quite well. And so we feel that we must, as we progressively enlarge the scale of this work, also look at more diverse location. And that's where we went to Gadchiroli and later to Nandurbar. And I think what we need to do is to carry this forward as people's movement. And then through that people's movement, take it to a scale where it will get integrated into, just like, government does several activities through NGOs. Now we should have NGOs or the colleges who are actually doing the silage development activity. And if there are several of them, then government can run a scheme to implement silage through them. So, but we'll have to take it to that level, and that is the way forward, according to me.
Thank you, sir. I have another question. This question is from Mr. Anil Hatikar, and he says, how can ensure innovations and new technologies are developed for small and marginal farmers with small land holdings which are farmer friendly? And how do we link the farmers to the end consumer so that they get remunerative price for their produce?
That's a very important question. The question is, let us not imagine that farmers are not innovative and only our academics are innovative. That is not the case. I think innovation resides everywhere. And the importance is of an ecosystem, which I have been stressing on, of diverse people. In silage, we are talking about an ecosystem in which farmers should be a part, the NGO should be a part, the university or college academics should be a part, the students should be a part. And it is this collective exchange between them that really gives rise to a proper definition of what is the problem at hand. That also gives rise to what is the probable solution that need to work on. And then you work on that solution. And I must, by way of an example, I must explain that, for example, take the case of simple water filter. Water filter development, the technology is from bark. They developed that nanofiltration medium, and now they have that silver impregnated nanofiltration medium. So this is actually comparable to best available anywhere. In fact, it has surpassed many other things. And these are in market. Bark technology filtration systems are in market, and they don't require electricity. They're very passive. You put water and you get safe water down below. But you couldn't buy such a filter from an urban market and take it to rural areas. They can't afford it. On the other hand, many of these initial innovations came from grassroots people, the farmers, local artisans. And then, of course, at RHRDF, they have now stabilized what is right for their area, and they are supplying it to a lot of schools. Or for that matter, you saw the one which is meant for the labor which goes for cutting the sugar cane in season. And so that's an example of innovation happening at grassroots level. But at the same time, supposing there is some idea from grassroots, they may not have the wherewithal to do everything. The wherewithal, some of the analysis, some of the research wherewithal may well exist in universities. And so I think this cross-fertilization is extremely important.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have two more questions if you have time. This question from
Just take a
Dr.
last question.
Anshu. Sorry?
We'll take only one question, and then I think we can other questions can be answered later on.
Yeah, so we'll take this one last question. This is from Dr. Anshu Agarwal. He is assistant professor at Oro University, Surat, Gujarat. So he says that how do you manage language problems in such trainings? As generally in villages, they have less exposure to Hindi, most of the times. So how do you manage these? And then he says that that if there is a platform through which we can connect to these activities and contribute something to it.
Well, I think both very important question. Language is important, but that's where it is not that you expect villagers to come to your college or university. You have to go to their village.
Hmm.
In fact, and this has been very rewarding. You must go to village. You must talk to them. You must understand their problem. And I must tell you, for example, at Gadchiroli, we have not done that, but it's a part of the project that is under implementation. At Gadchiroli, language problem, they all speak in Gondi, which is even Marathi speaking people won't be able to understand so easily. But the local people who are engaging with them, they are able to kind of create those bridges. But going forward, we are actually talking about a community radio in Gadchiroli to be able to engage with larger masses in local language. But this is important, and I think that is where silage, city people have to go to villages and engage with them. To expect that, no, we are sitting on the high table. If you have a problem, you come and stand at our door, tell or your problem, and we'll give you the answer. That actually does not work. And to imagine that we know more than them is fundamentally wrong. So we may be doing it in some aspect of it, but there are many other aspects which they know as well. And it's the combination of the two that will produce results. So I think it is important. Now, I have the organizations which I cited. You can Google them, and you will find information, and you can also find contacts, and you can get in touch with them. You can get in touch with the CADP at Nandurbar or the North Maharashtra University, STRC at Gondwana University, and RHRDF at Sweri. So you can just Google them and access and get in touch with them.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. We still have more questions, but what I'll do is I'll just jot down all the questions and share with you so that you can share your input on them. And now I would like to invite Dr.
I think we have come to the last now. Thank you very much. I think first of all, let me thank Dr. Kakodkar, who has spent a lot of time for us, sir. And it was really a treat for many of us, because I knew it because I have been associated with you. But I always wanted other people to know what is going on. And in spite of all your so much of efforts, I think Maharashtra, particularly MKCL and RGSTC too, it's a huge program which is being implemented, and it is wonderful that it is being inspired now. A lot of people are now thinking that yes, there are chances, and this pandemic has also taught us that going to villages is more safer. The other day I went to my sister's house in a village. Which, they don't know what is corona. They are all free working there. There is not a single case there. And I found that it is better to stay here instead of Nagpur. So there are a lot of things now which are coming to mind. So I must, sir, thank you very much for sparing your time. And this again, on behalf of AgroVision, on behalf of Ravi Goratkar, Hima Bhatia, and all of them, they really appreciate your efforts. And thank you very much.